East London is in hospital. A 14-year-old was killed in Hainault this morning. 4 others, including 2 police officers, have been injured and are being treated in hospital. Patrick Green, chief executive of the anti-knife crime charity the Ben Kinsella Trust, told LBC they've been pushing for tighter laws.
As long as you've got a debit card, you could have one of these knives delivered safely to you tomorrow morning. We're pushing for legislation and pushing for age verification to be enforced on websites as well, and for carriers to take responsibility in terms of what they're carrying.
2 men will appear in court next month after the sycamore gap tree was cut down in Northumberland last year. The men in their 30s have been charged with criminal damage. The King's told fellow cancer patients of his shock at being diagnosed earlier this year. Charles has returned to public duties for the first time since February. He's visited a cancer treatment centre in central London. And the government insists it will fine asylum seekers due to be deported to Rwanda who've stopped reporting to the Home Office. A document revealed more than half of those identified for removal can't be immediately located. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 2 points at 81.44. The pound buys $1.25 and €1.17. LBC weather, rain easing in the west tonight, showers along eastern coasts and a low of 4 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
It's 8:01 on LBC. Welcome to the programme. It's Tuesday's Cross Question. On our panel tonight, we have Jo Gideon, Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central. She's also the presenter of a new podcast called Nothing But a Number, which I was a guest on this afternoon, so we'll get her to tell us all about that. Ben Riley-Smith is political editor of the Daily Telegraph. He's got a new book out called The Right to Rule. Parmjit Dhanda is Labour campaigner and former MP and minister in the Blair and Brown governments. He's now executive director of the Back Heathrow campaign to support the airport's expansion. Nothing controversial about that, of course. And Christine Jardine is Liberal Democrat MP for Edinburgh West. Is that the best constituency in Edinburgh?
Undoubtedly.
I thought you'd say that. Who is the party spokesperson on the Cabinet Office, Women and Equalities and Scotland. So she's had a little bit of a busy week this week, I imagine. So the lines are open. We've cleared the board. So if you'd like to get through, you can do so now. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850. WhatsApp us on 0345 6060 973, and you can say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. So lots of ways to get in touch with us, and of course you can watch us on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Well, let's go to a text question first from Mike. Very short question. Should all police officers be armed? Now, we've talked over the last hour about this terrible incident in Hainault this morning. It's very dangerous to rush to judgment over one single incident. But it is one of these questions that's been asked for many, many years. And the police have never really wanted to be armed. I think most police officers I know just would not want to carry a gun. They think it should be for specialist officers to do that. But in the light of this event today, I guess that kind of question is going to be asked. Let's go to Christine.
Thank you. It's a hugely difficult question. Of course we want our police officers to be protected, and it was a horrible incident today. But I worry that if we arm all of our police officers routinely, they become targets as well. And you then, what is there to lose from attacking them because, they have a gun? And I do think I would worry about going down that route. It also puts immense pressure on them because they're dealing with the public every day, and if they're all routinely armed, then they have the pressure of carrying a loaded firearm in busy streets with innocent people, and I don't think that is fair. I think we do have to tackle knife crime, and we do have to do our best to ensure that incidents like this don't happen again. But I think the answer to that is in for example, what they did in Glasgow, which was about making it a public health issue, a social issue, an education issue, and tackling the problem at its root, disaffected young people, giving them...
People have been saying that on my programme for the last 10 years, and nothing has changed in the rest of the country, it seems.
It seems. I mean, we did tackle it in Glasgow effectively, but I am very disappointed that nothing has been done to tackle it in the same sort of way in the rest of the country. But I don't think the answer is to arm police officers, because I worry it would make them more of a target.
Have you ever had a police officer come to your surgery or write to you saying, I think we should be armed?
No.
Joe, have you?
No.
Parmjit, when you were an MP?
Never. I can honestly say that. But I think we should actually begin by saying thank you to the police officers today in the job that they did. Really difficult set of circumstances. We don't want to go down the Trump route of the only way to deal with a bad guy with a gun is to have a good guy with a gun. I remember the days when even in Parliament not many police officers had guns. It's become a routine thing, so let's not pretend that the police aren't armed. There are more armed response units than there ever were. But I think in their day-to-day, in terms of police presence, I don't think that's the way we have ever done things in this country. I hope that we don't go down that line.
But we are fairly unique in that, aren't we? I mean, if you think about France, Germany, I mean, there was routine arming of police officers in those countries and many others in Europe.
Well, as I said, there are far more police out there with weapons, and you see that around the parliamentary estate, for example. But as a matter of routine, is that what we want? I think what most people want is community policing. I'd love to see that brought back. It's something that actually began in my old constituency in Gloucester with a little experiment that John Prescott started. It became a very, very popular thing. Over the last decade, obviously, we've seen a dwindling number of officers and far less of that. But more police on the street, I think, is what people really want, rather than armed police on the street.
I'm going to say something really controversial now.
Go on.
I miss John Prescott. He just added something to political life.
A bit of spice, the occasional left hook.
I disagree with him on virtually everything. We could do with a few more characters.
I want to get him in here sometime.
Yeah, I think he's quite ill at the moment, so I don't think that's going to happen. Joe Gideon.
So I don't think we should arm our police. I think that if you arm the police, then you have that sort of escalation of, well, if the police have got firearms, we're going to have firearms. You match like for like. And America is the classic example of where everybody thinks it is a right to bear arms. And
well, it is a right in America.
Yeah, well, exactly. But the fact that they carry arms, I think, makes them more of a target rather than safer.
I remember
and that's
borrowing
the culture that
my friend's Pontiac Trans Am, massive car, and driving into Detroit and then parking the car and opening up his glove box, and there was a gun. And okay, it was Detroit, so you can sort of almost understand it. I was really shocked by this, thinking, what should I do?
So I was in Jamaica a few months ago, and there they have, I think, the second highest murder rate in the world. And it's down to young people and guns, and the guns come from America. So, guns, gang culture, if you have an escalation where it's normal to carry guns, I think, knife crime is appalling, the levels of knife crime, but it's nothing compared to what we would see in these streets if we had that sort of different attitude towards gun carrying.
Now, the stereotypical Daily Telegraph reader, Ben Riley-Smith, people would imagine that they would not be just in favour of arming the police, but arming us all as well. Is that a perverted view of a Daily Telegraph reader?
It's a varied readership. I wouldn't buy into this stereotype. You can understand the instinct from the caller, because there's been this tragedy and people are trying to understand how to avoid it. I mean, I'm not a politician, but as a punter, if you begin to think through the logic of every policeman being armed, if you went to a football match, there's a lot of police. Do we really want every single one of them to have a gun? Or when you...
If you go to Millwall, yes.
Or if you pass to Bobby's on the street doing neighbourhood policing, is that what you'd want? I don't know. It's also worth pointing out, presumably, what driving the caller is this idea that this attacker could have been stopped. Actually, the footage that's come out today suggests he was stopped, but it was tasers. It wasn't guns that did that. So ultimately, he was
Well, I can't see how, if they'd had guns, could they have stopped him more quickly? I don't see that. I mean, a taser has the same kind of reaction as a gun. You couldn't, having a gun wouldn't have made him being stopped more quickly, I wouldn't have thought.
No, I don't think so. I suppose there's a linked argument about whether more policemen should be carrying tasers and whether it needed a special unit to be called in to stop him. But I spent 3 or 4 years in America, and I remember that Donald Trump argument. Whenever there was a school shooting, he would say, arm teachers, because the way to stop school shootings if you had teachers with guns. I think if you follow through that rationale of the more people having guns, I don't think it.
And do we want to be like that? That's the question.
Yeah. But it's a cultural thing in America as well. I remember as a young reporter being sent out to Houston to cover a story about a young oilman from Aberdeen. Well, he was actually from Carnoustie who'd been shot in America in some incident at night that had gone wrong, some joke. He'd gone to these people's door and knocked the door and then gone round the back of the house, and the guy got up in the middle of the night and shot him. And when I was there covering the story, I was told regularly by reporters from various networks that, well, he was on their property. They were entitled to shoot him. And they showed me the state constitution of Texas, which says you have a right to shoot someone who's disturbing your chickens or on your land. Now, that's a cultural thing in America, but I think we are very far from that. And we wouldn't accept the sort of pervasive use of guns that they do in America. And I'm glad of that, because I think they are incredibly... I don't believe this thing of Donald Trump's that, guns don't kill people. People do. If people have guns, they can do an awful lot of damage. And if we start arming the police, like you say, it will then become the criminals want bigger guns than the police have got.
Do you remember the Tony Martin case, the Norfolk farmer who shot an intruder?
Yes.
Oh, that I remember caused huge controversy as to whether he was entitled to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, well, he absolutely was. The intruder was on his property. I can't remember the exact details of it, but he was the one that, in the end, I think, was sent to prison, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which seemed to be complete... I mean, in America, they would have just laughed at us.
Yes.
For that. My dad was a farmer. I mean, he carried a 12-bore shotgun under his bed.
These are
in the farming community, that's not unusual, even
but
today.
These are isolated
These are instances in time, because the dial swung completely the other way after Dunblane.
Yeah.
It also swung the other way after, you may remember, after 7/7, where everything was itchy, especially in this part of the world. Everybody was concerned, and the John Charles de Jimenez incident, when police did shoot somebody.
Yes.
And those poor officers were in a very difficult position. The country was on high alert, but there were real consequences.
Well, there's an example of the danger of having police officers armed. Those poor police officers had to live with that. And they were, carrying out their duty. The country was in a state of high alert. They were armed. And that's the sort of position you would put police officers in all the time.
But there's also a big problem now with armed police officers in that there's too few of them. And it's partly because of the new regulations that they feel that they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. So if they do discharge their weapon, the automatic assumption nowadays seems to be that they were wrong to do it. And there's long investigations from the IPC, and so many officers are now deciding to stand down as armed police officers, and that's a dangerous trend. I mean, if it gets to the point where we don't have enough of them, and I think we're quite near that point, I mean, goodness knows what the implications of that are.
But looking at it from the other side of the lens, wouldn't it be lovely if there were less knives in circulation on the streets?
Yes.
I think you
wouldn't
mean
that
fewer.
make everybody's fewer? Thank you.
I'm a pedant.
You're not editing my book now.
No, but I'm a pedant on that. And I know if I don't pick people up, then I get lots of texts saying, why didn't you pick him up on that? So apologies, it was a bit rude. Right.
Working class boy from A's, I'm going to get a few things wrong, Iain.
I saw you came from Gloucester, but there we are.
No, never pretended to. I love the place.
Well, it is a lovely place. I spoke at the Gloucester History Festival.
And the best place in the world to represent.
A really lovely place. Right, enough of that. We will move on to a different subject in just a few moments' time with our panel. It's 8:15.
This is LBC.
Here at the Virgin Games Development Hub, we run all sorts of tests to make sure our players get the most thrilling experiences, wherever they are. Like testing our game recommendations feature for people playing in the bath. Or our daily free games for people playing on the train. Or the perfect amount of free spins you get when you play £10. Let me see. Oh, it's 30.
Get 30 free spins when you play £10. Virgin Games. Serious about play. Visit virgingames.com. 18 plus, UK only. New members only. Must opt in. Free spins on Double Bubble. 1p coin size, max size. 30-day expiry. Full rules at virgingames.com. Play responsibly. BeGambleAware.org.
Amazon offer full-time apprenticeships to all fulfillment centre employees, like Hannah. She's now a trained electrical engineer, and to her, the buzz of lights is the best sound in the world. Because it's a reminder of how much she's achieved. In 2 years, she's gone from a warehouse employee to working as a qualified engineer. And in her new blue overalls and hard hat, her daughter thinks she looks like a superhero. At Amazon, we're committed to training and career growth. Course eligibility applies. See amazonapprenticeships.co.uk.
If loose and missing teeth or dentures affect the foods you can eat and make you feel embarrassed about your smile, speak to us at TDC about how we restore full sets of teeth so you get your smile and your confidence back. To learn more and book your consultation, visit smileinaday.co.uk. We're now part of Bupa.
School reunion. What am I doing? Getting these people together after all these years. The last time we shared a room, there was leg warmers and rah-rah skirts involved.
We can't help the uncertainty around getting old friends together. But when it comes to bringing your old pensions together, we can help. Transfer all your old pensions into one place. To combine, go to standardlife.co.uk. Transferring pensions won't be right for everyone. Money invested is at risk. Provided by Phoenix Life Limited, trading as Standard Life. For full details, visit standardlife.co.uk.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
60 minutes past 8. Now, here's a bit of breaking news. The Sun is reporting that Britain has removed the first failed asylum seeker to Rwanda. The unnamed migrant was flown out of the UK on Monday evening. It's the first time the government has ever relocated a failed asylum seeker to a third country in what ministers are hoping is the first of thousands. Now, after his bid to stay in Britain was rejected at the end of 2023, the man, who is of African origin, voluntarily accepted passage to a new life in the Central African nation. He was sent on a commercial flight and handed around £3,000 from the British taxpayer to help relocate under the terms of the deal with Rwanda. So the removal was part of a side scheme to the forced deportation of illegal immigrants policy that's set to begin flights in July. So my podcast colleague Jackie Smith is wrong. There has been somebody going to Rwanda before the election. And as if by magic, we have a WhatsApp question on this from Nikki, who says the government has lost thousands of asylum seekers. The UK has no national database of refugees. David Cameron cancelled the identity card scheme, and police can't ask for ID. Shouldn't these measures be adopted? And Parmjit, you were an MP when Jackie Smith, as Home Secretary, tried to bring in ID cards, as she constantly reminds me. Do you think we should be looking at it again?
Absolutely. Biometric data is now a common thing. It wasn't back in those days. I never go anywhere without my driving licence in my pocket. It's common sense. It would be helpful. And it's really interesting that you say there's news of the first person going to Rwanda. You know, it's only cost £400 million for that one person to get over there. Yeah. And
oh, you're just quibbling.
Well, I'm just quibbling, but for that £400 million, we could actually have flown every single one of them over to Paris and kept them in the Paris Ritz Hotel for 4 years.
More importantly, that would have that would have paid for 7 million GP appointments. And I think people in this country will be wondering tonight about the cost of this scheme and now being paid money to go. That's not going to act as a deterrent if people think, oh, if I go to the UK, they'll pay me to go to Rwanda. It's really, this scheme has cost a fortune.
However,
and I don't think in the long run it is workable.
I mean, I've always argued that it can't be a deterrent if you're only going to send a couple of hundred people.
No.
However, look at the number of people who are now going to Ireland, and presumably they're going to Ireland because they fear that they might be sent to Rwanda. Now, Rishi Sunak, if he was here, he would say, well, that is a deterrent. I mean, I think we haven't heard the last of that one, but because the Irish are absolutely hopping mad.
I'm no doubt the Irish are, but that's a different issue from whether the people who come here, detaining them and deporting them to Rwanda is the right answer. For me, the right answer is to tackle the problem at its root, to break the gangs and to provide safe legal passage to various countries and to invest again in international development and in creating stabilising areas of the world that people are fleeing from at the moment so that they don't flee. And I think we have to respect that in this country, we invented the word, I've said this on here before, we invented the word refugee. When the Huguenots came here, the place where they stayed in London was called the Refuge, and the people who stayed there were called refugees. We invented the word, and we've always looked after people who are fleeing persecution. And I don't want to see us lose that.
See, this is why we have you on the programme, because you always educate us on something that we didn't know before. Ben, actually, no, let's stick with you for a second. You didn't say whether you thought we should consider ID cards.
Oh, I have a kind of inbuilt concern about ID cards. I don't like the way that we are watched constantly at the moment. And do we need ID cards? Because at the moment, if you phone HMRC or the NHS or wherever, they ask you for your national insurance number, and if you have your national insurance number, that works well enough. I don't actually see that I need an ID card. If you have your driver's licence, if you have your passport, if you have photo ID, why do we need a specific ID card? We don't.
Because those people that we're talking about very specifically won't have one. So if everybody has to have
when you
an
say
ID
those
card,
people, who do you mean?
I'm talking about the refugees that we're talking about at the moment.
So we're going to spend yet more money?
If everybody who's in this country, well,
why do they need ID cards?
Well, the whole point is actually knowing where people are. That's what. That's a question we've been talking about.
Isn't the slight flaw in the idea that these people have absconded? They're meant to be staying in touch with the state, and they've disappeared. So, if they were issued with an ID card, would that stop them absconding? I don't know.
Jay says, I'm sorry, Iain, did you just say that the asylum seeker was given £3,000? I'm in my car on the way home. I think I misheard. You didn't mishear, Jay. Your hearing is perfect. Clearly, you're very shocked by that.
Can I explain that? I think there's a nuance with what's happening here. So there is the Rwanda deportation scheme, which is the government forcing a load of people who have arrived here as asylum seekers to go to Rwanda against their will, fundamentally, because they're trying to seek asylum here. Separately, linked to that, they've started this scheme where some of the people who are already here, they are saying, we will offer you money to go to Rwanda. I think there's a bit of clever politics being done by the government, because they can say, look, the number of people who are going to Rwanda is happening, but the person who's gone today is slightly separate from this Rwanda deportation scheme. This is somebody who's been offered a load of cash, and they said, OK, I will take asylum in Rwanda, rather than people who are being forcibly moved to Rwanda. So that's still meant to happen in July. But the caller is right. I mean, there's more money. It is more money being thrown at the problem. I suppose to address Parmjit's point about the money, what the government would say is they are pouring huge amounts of cash into renting spaces in hotels to put up asylum seekers, and that if you buy into their argument that it will prove a deterrent, and fundamentally at some point you get some of these savings back. That's an open question right now.
Joe Gideon, you've been very silent so far.
Yes, I mean, I was just about to make that point, that the cost of doing nothing is also enormous, and it's enormous in every constituency where you have hundreds of asylum seekers in a sort of state of limbo, in hotels, in accommodation, and then the knock-on effect in our schools. We have a real challenge, and in places like Stoke-on-Trent, we were a dispersal area for asylum seekers, so welcomed asylum seekers for years, but that has actually meant that the cost to the council of actually looking after these people and has had a detrimental effect on the community, the access to doctors, access to education, and so something had to be done. So, I'm not a massive fan of the Rwanda scheme personally, but I understand that this was something that...
Did you vote for it?
I voted for it because actually I think I might have been not in that day.
You had a subsequent appointment.
I actually had norovirus. Oh, genuinely.
Wow.
No, I do remember now, because the chief didn't believe me. And I sent a WhatsApp message and I said, truly, you would not want me to come down from Stoke to Westminster in the state that I'm in. Exactly. Yeah. But I think that was the second reading. But in the final round, I supported it because of the deterrent effect, and something has to be done. If we do nothing, then it will only get worse.
That's about the worst reason I've ever heard for supporting a piece of legislation. Something must be done.
Well, no. I mean, that's the role of government to do something.
You don't really agree with that.
No, that's the role of government to do something that it thinks will work.
But you clearly don't, yet you voted for it.
No, I clearly think that I would love to see a world where we didn't need asylum seekers. I'd love to see a lot of money spent on international development so that we could tackle some of the problems at source. So I come from a slightly different space as a One Nation Conservative. I'm hoping that we have a more humanitarian approach to refugees of all types. But, I recognise that there is an issue that they are crossing the Channel, and something has to be done to stop that specific route into the country. But European countries all have the same problems. So what we really need is an international solution to how we, as countries that are attract both economic migrants and asylum seekers, how we can tackle the problems at source.
Charles is being very uncharacteristically cynical here. He says, Iain, I've never heard you so animated and, dare I say, excited that some poor soul has been deported to Rwanda. Is this grossly cruel policy a substitute for fox hunting for right-wing... Well, I'm not going to use that word. I'm not excited about it. I think the fact that somebody has actually gone to Rwanda now, and which some of us thought would never actually happen, is something to comment on, isn't it? I mean, I don't agree. I've never agreed with the policy, so I'm not particularly excited about it, but it is a little bit of breaking news. Now, Chris in Croydon has a follow-up on this. Chris, hi.
Oh, yes, good evening, Ian. Good evening, panel. Yes, my question is this. Should we offer the French our own personnel to help patrol their beaches?
I think we already have, and they've said no, haven't we?
I think we've offered it, and I think they have said yes in limited. There was a period when there was a standoff when they didn't seem to be saying yes because they were quite concerned about this idea of foreign policemen kind of being on
Which, to be fair, we would be as well if it was the other way around, wouldn't we?
But I think it possibly got to the point that they agreed some joint patrols, or certainly they're working very closely together. But yeah, that's an open question about why we shouldn't be doing more on that side.
It does sound like a lot more could be done on that, actually, working better with the French and actually breaking up these gangs in the first place that have actually, taking people for everything that they've got and then putting them in these little boats where they invariably end up drowning and, hundreds and hundreds of people in tiny little boats.
They are slashing the boats now, aren't they? Which, if they did that to everyone,
they were actually
more
in the last year than any other year previously. So, but the other side of the equation also is that money could be invested in terms of Home Office facilities and more civil service staff actually doing something about the backlog, because it has got out of
that is happening, isn't it?
It doesn't seem to be happening very quickly. If anything, I think we've seen a loss of civil servants.
Well, I think the backlog has come down from 170,000 to 120,000, so it is coming down. Now, you might say, well, that's not fast enough, but they are addressing it to an extent.
And at the same time, more boats this year than any year previously. So it's not a situation they're on top of. You're right. It sounds like somebody has decided that they want to go to Rwanda today. That's a long way short of solving a problem that has cost the country so far £400 million. And as I said, you could actually have paid
and 3,000
a flight to get there, and an extra 3,000. A flight to get to Paris and put them in a hotel. It's
no idea.
Extraordinary.
One of the things that I find quite surprising, I saw a newsreel of the gangs and people running down the beach to these dinghies, and must have been French police, stopped them from getting in the dinghies, but then did nothing with them, so they just sort of tried again the next day. And I think that's an issue that probably needs looking at collaboratively with the French. That, why are they still, a couple of 100 metres away every time? We need to move the frontier of attempting to cross the Channel back.
Well, when you said you saw a newsreel, I had this image of a Pathé News thing. Sort of, I say Johnny Foreigner's sort of getting on a boat and coming over here. He's got to be repelled, and sort of, it's hilarious. But anyway, now, before we go to the news, let's have a quick word about your new podcast, which isn't launched until the end of May. It's called Nothing But a Number. What does that mean?
It is Nothing But a Number. So age is nothing but a number. It's looking at age and ageing in our society. We're all getting older. Most of us are in denial. And most of us would like to see different attitudes towards age and a more positive approach to age and ageing. So it's conversations with people like yourself who have...
He's basically ageing, that's what she's saying. In front of your eyes.
who've commented on the fact that, you know,
I know you were reading out articles I'd written like 2012 or something. I was thinking, oh my God, what's she going to ask me next? Certainly done your research.
I did my research.
You really did. Anyway, so that will come out at the end of May.
At the end of May.
Is it available to subscribe to in advance?
It is available to subscribe to. Look on my social media and you will see, I think Thursday we're launching the kind of pre-launch sequence of...
Well, of course, the rest of the panel are far too young to be invited as guests, I guess. But, hey.
You're too kind, Ian. You're too kind.
I confess I did have Tom Tugendhat, although he didn't quite qualify.
Did you?
Yes. He didn't quite qualify. Well, because
How old's he?
He's 50.
Oh, he doesn't look 50.
No, I know. But it is that thing of no matter how old you are, there are people younger than you, and there are things that you still want to do in life. There's things that you have done, and it's kind of framing it. So, you know, if you were a sports person, you're 50, you're retired, 10, 20 years ago. So within the context, you know, is 50 too old for a politician? You know, we had that discussion.
We did. And you clearly say no.
I clearly say no.
Indeed. Right, let's move on. We've got lots of questions coming in. 0345 6060 973. It's 8:31, time for the LBC News headlines with... I think it's Daryl Jackson, but it is Daryl Jackson.
A man detained over a sword attack in northeast London is being treated in hospital. The 36-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a 14-year-old boy was killed in Hainault this morning. A former Environment Secretary has told LBC it's an absolute nonsense to suggest businesses will see costs go up as a result of new post-Brexit checks. George Eustice has dismissed concerns about the impact they'll have. And 2 men have been charged after the famous sycamore gap tree was cut down in Northumberland last year. The men in their 30s will appear in court charged with criminal damage next month. LBC weather: rain easing in the west tonight, showers along eastern coasts and a low of 4 degrees.
Call the Commissioner. Put your questions to the Met Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, tomorrow morning with Nick Ferrari at breakfast from 7, only on LBC.
Here at the Virgin Games Development Hub, we run all sorts of tests to make sure our players get the most thrilling experiences, wherever they are. Like testing our game recommendations feature for people playing in the bath. Or our daily free games for people playing on the train. Or the perfect amount of free spins you get when you play £10. Let me see. Oh, it's 30.
Get 30 free spins when you play £10. Virgin Games. Serious about play. Visit virgingames.com. 18 plus, UK only. New members only. Must opt in. Free spins on double bubble, 1p coin size, max size, 30-day expiry. Full rules at virgingames.com. Play responsibly. BeGambleAware.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Marley.
From Paramount Pictures.
I want to make music that changed the world.
What do you have in mind?
Something big. Give me a one drop, man.
Bob Marley, One Love.
Sometimes the messenger has to become the message.
Experience the untold story at home.
You like that one?
Bob Marley, One Love. Own it now.
I'm Fiona McKillop, specialist in periodontics at the Darwood & Tanner Dental Practice. If you've struggled to find the right solutions for your gum problems, our team are here, ready to give you the very best in dental care and implant dentistry, so you can regain your natural, healthy smile.
From gum care to dental implants, Darwood & Tanner, celebrating 30 years at the forefront of world-class dentistry.
To find out more and meet the team, start at darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
Here in the South East, we sell amazing products and services the whole world wants.
We're global processing services from London, and we help people pay in innovative ways in over 48 countries.
Whilst at Naturally Tribal in Milton Keynes, our all-natural skincare range soothes skin conditions in 5 countries.
So whether you're new to exporting or experienced, explore global growth for your business with free support from the UK government. Access information, training, events and expert advice to help you find new customers overseas. Visit great.gov.uk to get started.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
8:34. We have an excellent panel tonight. Joe Gideon is Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent, Stoke-on-Trent Central, turned podcaster. Ben Riley-Smith, political editor of the Daily Telegraph. Have you got a podcast, Ben? And if not, why not?
I don't know. I felt out of place. It's terrible.
Well, if you do get one, Jackie Smith will insist that you do it with a female podcast partner because she's fed up with all of these male double acts.
Okay. Is she open? Is she looking for a move?
No, she's not, Ben.
Okay.
Just so you know.
For now.
Christine Jardine, I can imagine you doing a good podcast. You've got the right sense of humour for it.
Well, I used to be a radio broadcaster, so I just love it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Lib Dem something you could do, but that might turn people off.
That sounds... I was going to say that sounds like the most unentertaining programme in the world. Lib Dem something.
And Parmjit Dhanda, former Labour MP, do you miss... I mean, you were defeated, weren't you? Was it 2010 or 2015?
2010, yeah.
I mean, how difficult was it to adjust?
Goodness me, how long have you got? Read the book.
I published it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's going to, in all likelihood, there's going to be a big churn at this general election. I think people forget, regardless of party, the human aspect of that. Some of those people will be folk with young children. Some of them will be quite early in their career. Some of them will want to go, but there will be very many others who are actually going to go through some difficult times. So
and their staff.
And their staff, yeah, very much so.
Now, Sally says, Iain, I'm sorry to pick you up on this point, but I have to point out that Tony Martin shot a 16-year-old in the back while he was running away. He was charged with manslaughter, not murder, though. So I completely stand corrected on that. The boy was a thieving little scrote, but you just can't do that and have right on your side. Well... yeah, let's not get into that because I have to say I have my sympathies with Tony Martin on that one. Let's go to Hassan in Cambridge. Hello, Hassan.
Hello. Hi. Can George Galloway's Worker Party take away left-wing voters from the Labour Party as Reform has been doing to the Tories?
Well, George Galloway announced today that he had 500 candidates ready for the general election, including the former England cricketer Monty Panesar, who I know listens to this programme. So that's quite interesting. Now, I have this theory that the size of Labour's majority is going to be determined by how many votes Reform take away from the Conservatives and make safe seats more marginal, and how many Labour votes the Greens and George Galloway take away from Keir Starmer. And it's those two. It's not going to be the performance of the Labour Party or the Conservative Party that necessarily going to decide the majority. It's going to be the performance of fringe parties, to which I don't include yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So how much effect do you think George Galloway is going to have, Parmjit?
I can almost see the Can Monty Swing It kind of headlines out there at the moment.
Oh, very good.
He does love his politics, Monty Panesar. I mean, he's a regular caller into LBC.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Okay. To be honest, I don't think... I think people do see through George a little bit easier because, he's an enormous personality, but he's always... kind of wrapped in controversy, whether he's on Big Brother or whether he's doing politics. And I think he's just seen as so divisive. I don't see him damaging this new, reworked and changed Labour Party under Keir. I think the key thing, Keir worked this out very, very early. If he was going to win a general election, you win it from the centre ground. And it's the same way for all political parties. If you're going to win a general election, you win it from the centre ground. And I've been out knocking on doors, and it's extraordinary in places like, Hampshire and Bedfordshire and places like that. The number of former Conservative voters who aren't going to vote Conservative next time around. So I don't think there is a threat to the Labour Party. I think, certainly not from Galloway. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be cognizant of all political parties, but we've got to continue to do what we're doing, govern from the centre, be wise, listen, and work incredibly hard.
There's lots of seats still up for grabs. So are you intending to try and get in again?
I'd probably fail the medical. Yeah, at 52. Are you talking about retiring at 50 now?
And what's your real answer?
Did somebody once say something about rugby balls and packs or something?
So that's a yes. You do want to do it.
It's not something I lay in bed worrying about.
No, but you look at the list of seats that are coming up and think,
I don't actually. I genuinely don't. I'm in a very fortunate position where I've got a great job.
Yeah, but you've only got a few months to go. You need to be looking at it seriously now.
Well, at what stage did you enter politics?
I was 67.
Well, I've got a few years left then, really, haven't I?
Yeah, but timing is everything. If there's going to be a big landslide, you probably would get in this time, whereas maybe in 5 years, 10 years down the line, you wouldn't.
Who knows? It could have, would have, should have. I've been very, very lucky. I had 9 years as a Member of Parliament. We did great things in the constituency, 3 ministerial jobs in that time. I've also had a great job outside that in the private sector, doing some pretty big stuff, including working on the world's biggest privately funded...
It's not the same, though, is it? It doesn't give you the adrenaline rush that politics does.
I mean, I wouldn't be around this table accepting your invitation if I didn't love these kinds of
we just thought this was an open application for a Labour seat somewhere.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It wasn't last time I was on, so I don't know if it is this time either.
Ben Riley-Smith, George Galloway, will he have an impact, do you think?
I think he absolutely will, and to widen it out slightly, I think that the splits in Labour over the Israel-Gaza conflict and where Keir Starmer should position the party are absolutely real, and there is a genuine frustration among the Muslim community that he has not been loud enough in calling for a ceasefire or quick enough in calling for a ceasefire, and you can see that over the last 6 months. There was that point when 10 of his front benchers stood back because they wanted to vote for an amendment that was calling for an immediate ceasefire back in November. Galloway is kind of riding that tide of sentiment, but it's not just him. There are candidates popping up against some big names. Wes Streeting is facing one almost purely on the argument that they should be taking a tougher stance on Gaza. I think the one way it might be different from reform is reforms, the kind of frustrated Tory voters going to reform is happening right across the country. I think the frustration with Gaza and Labour's position is predominantly happening with the Muslim community. And when I've talked to pollsters, they've said, look, in places where there is a big Muslim vote, Labour MPs tend to have those seats by a massive majority. So even if a big chunk of those people turned against them or backed a different candidate, it's probably not, you're not going to lose that many seats. So I think it's a slightly different dynamic to the reform one.
Christine?
I kind of hope not. I mean, with George Galloway's had various incarnations in British politics, and none of them have really led to anything very much. And I think his election was a reaction to something specific that was happening at the time, and I don't think that his party will be a serious force in the general election.
Do you think the media pay him too much attention?
I think, as has already been said, he's a big figure. He's a personality. He is entertaining in a lot of ways. He's very intelligent. He's very articulate. But I don't think his party is going to be a force in the election. And I mean, although I take on board what you say about the splits in the Labour Party, I think they are quite obvious. But I do think that when it comes to the general election, people think very much about who is going to be the next government. And in seats which are potentially held by Conservatives at the moment, we're in second place in about 80 where we can win. And people will be looking to the party that can replace the Conservatives in those seats, and that will be us. I mean, some places it will be Labour, but in very few places, in fact, nowhere that I can think of, will it be George Galloway's party or reform. So I think when we actually get to the election, that will be what's important.
What does success look like for the Liberal Democrats at the next election? I mean, you've got, 14 seats at the moment?
More MPs.
Yeah, well, we know that, but how many
I would
more?
like to get back to the situation where we are the third party.
Well, the SNP are doing your work for you on that one, aren't they?
They're doing quite a good job of that in Scotland at the moment. I'd like to see us get back to the situation where we are ahead of them. I think that would be good for British politics. It would be good for stability, particularly in Scotland. And I think that's what, we would hope to aim for.
Just on, I know this has nothing to do with the question, but just on what's going on in Scotland this week, it beggars belief, in a sense, that the SNP have gone from sort of January, February last year, where they were masters of all they surveyed, and we're now in a situation where they're looking to rehabilitate John Swinney. I mean, it doesn't get much more damning than that, does it?
John Swinney, who as leader delivered the worst election results.
Well, that's what I meant. I wasn't being deliberately insulting to him.
No, but
he is 2 years younger than me, by the way, Joe, just so you know.
I think they see him... I don't know, I think they see him as a safe pair of hands, and maybe it's a harking back to a time when the SNP were stable, where...
Is he the Ed Davey of Scottish politics?
That's unkind to Ed Davey, if you don't mind me saying so. I think he's probably... I don't know who to compare John Swinney to. John Swinney I like. I have a lot of time for John Swinney. As a person, I don't agree with his politics. We disagree vehemently about independence, but I have a lot of respect for John Swinney. But... And I think that if he becomes, which I expect to happen, if he becomes leader within the next week to 10 days, it will be because the Scottish National Party recognises that they need stability.
Because Kate Forbes is missing the boat, isn't she?
This time, yes, possibly. But I don't think this is Kate's moment. I don't think she's what the SNP or government in Scotland needs at the moment. I think people in Scotland are fed up with this constant... focus on independence, constant arguing within the SNP, the arguments with the Green Party, because our NHS is crumbling, our schools are plummeting down the league tables, our roads are falling apart, public services are stretched, councils have no money. People want those things addressed. They want to be able to get a GP or an NHS dentist, and they can't. And the SNP has failed to address those issues. They've now had 17 years in power this month. Well, next month, May. They'll have been in power for 17 years. And people are looking at them and saying, yeah, but what about all those promises you made us nearly 20 years ago now that haven't been fulfilled? And they are becoming tired of this sort of anti-Westminster obsession. We had scenes in the chamber last night which were frankly ludicrous. We had the SNP blaming the UK government for the fact that the legislation wasn't going to be implemented in Scotland, when in fact it was the senior law officer who's a minister in the Scottish government who had said that it couldn't be. And people in Scotland see through that now and are tired of it, and they want serious government which is about the issues that affect them. And I think the SNP have fallen foul perhaps of their own media and their propaganda, and the cracks began to appear a couple of years ago with, the dispute between Sturgeon and Salmond about various different things. They've got wider, and Humza Yousaf is a nice guy.
Oh, you're not allowed to say that. I said that on Twitter yesterday.
Oh, did you get into trouble for that?
Completely cast it.
I'll get into even more
I said he's
trouble,
fundamentally decent. No, he's not. He's a racist, people say.
Oh, he's a racist. I mean, I'll get into even more trouble probably. But, fundamentally he's a good guy. But he wasn't a good First Minister. And I think he made some mistakes, and now they've got to move on. But I think it's too late for them.
And we have to move on as well after that monologue from the SNP. We will
my favourite subject,
Well, I'm sure, but we will need to get an SNP MP on Cross Question next week to counter all of that. Right, we'll come on to more subjects in just a second. Thank you to Hassan in Cambridge. It's 8:47.
This is LBC.
Summer's out there. Rent a car with Enterprise and unlock it. Prepay and save 10% on your Enterprise rental this summer. Terms and conditions apply.
There it is, sat round doing nothing, that old lump sum. But what if you could get it moving with a Shawbrook savings account? Suddenly, it's looking healthier. It finally got off its AER. So stand up and take notice of our notice accounts. Bond with our fixed-rate bonds, or take it easy with easy access. Save smarter, not harder, with Shawbrook. Spark your interest today at shawbrook.co.uk. Shawbrook Bank is authorised by the Prudential Regulation Authority and regulated by the FCA and PRA.
With UK Export Finance, I'm fulfilling more export orders from around the world with working capital support.
Export insurance means I'll get paid when exporting to challenging markets.
At UK Export Finance, we believe no viable UK export should fail for lack of finance or insurance. Between 2022 and 2023, we provided £6.5 billion of government-backed trade finance to support UK exports. Learn how we could help you win export contracts, fulfil orders, and get paid. Search UK Export Finance today.
Listeners,
We interrupt the airwaves to share an incredible discovery. The reason why Britain hasn't been so great of late is because the country hasn't been eating enough Weetabix. We must get to work in rebuilding Great Britain, Bix by Bix, by delivering Weetabix to whoever's in charge of fixing potholes, to VAR, and people who somehow manage to park over 2 bays. To Britain, we must say. Have you had your Weetabix?
This one's for the fed up. This one's for the hot and stuffy. This one's for everyone who thought they couldn't have aircon in their apartment or listed building. Because you can. For years, Call U have supplied and installed fully internal aircon systems with no mess, no fuss, and no external condenser. So head to callu.london today, before the summer's here. Call U, for a cool, comfortable home.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
Joe Gideon, Ben Riley-Smith, Parmjit Dhanda and Christine Jardine taking your calls and questions. Here's one from Helena. Food importers say the new post-Brexit checks on imports could raise costs by 60%. Is this what the sunlit uplands look like? I don't know how they get to 60%, but maybe someone can explain that. Ben?
I don't think it's going to be that high. There is some official government estimate for how much it would raise. I can't remember food inflation. I can't remember if it's 0.2 or 0.02. I think it's 0.2%. But clearly there will be some impact on costs. This is kind of goods travelling from the EU into Britain that need to be checked to make sure they're safe. There's things like plants. I was actually talking to my colleague who'd been looking into this today, and there are some remarkable things, like currently the checks when they arrive, they all close at 7 p.m. So if you, except for one massive area where they can go, which has had a lot of queues today, but most of the places you arrive in the UK, if you get in after 7 p.m, you've got to wait till 7 a.m.
Well, even in Dover?
I think there's one mega processing centre which reportedly today has just been absolutely chock-a-block.
Why have they introduced this?
Well, I think it's the reality of Brexit, that you are outside.
They didn't have to introduce it. There was no obligation to introduce border checks. They could have just let it go on.
I think with all of these things, it's basically if you want to diverge, so if you want to move away from European standards on safety at all, then you need to work out a way to check goods that are applying to different standards. So it's always at the heart of all these Brexit economic debates. Do you want the freedom to embrace the Brexit potential and come up with your own rules and regulations and safety arrangements and move away? And if so, that means more friction at the border. Or do you want to try and align with Brussels? And Labour talks about aligning on some more things like veterinary issues, but then that curtails your ability to move away.
Christine?
Oh, Brexit bonus. I mean, really. I sometimes wonder if what we have done is, if there was ever any threat of anybody else leaving the European Union, they look at how it's going in this country and think, oh no, not doing that. This is just yet another example of where people weren't told exactly what Brexit would mean. And people were not given information about this sort of thing and to base their decision on. And
that's your fault.
Oh, my fault?
Yeah, well, you're collectively.
Oh, you mean politicians?
Well, the Remain campaign, if you're saying, oh, people weren't told, well, that's your fault for not telling them at the time.
Oh, we did try, and we did do our very best to say that this is not going to be the sunlit uplands that everybody claims. It's not going to be some utopia. There are going to be serious problems with imports, exports. It's going to affect our trade. We tried all these things, and people, for very good reason, thought that, you know, what they were being told by Brexit, the Brexit campaigners, there must be some truth in it, and, you know...
And they're not necessarily going to believe a politician saying the opposite.
Exactly, and it was a debate which we had, and I think now when we look back, we can see that perhaps not all the arguments that we should have given credence to, we gave credence to it. Perhaps people weren't given all the facts at the time. And our food producers, from day one, have said that it was a bad idea. And our retailers have worried about imports. All these things are now coming true. And I'm still waiting on this much vaunted Brexit bonus that we were all promised.
Well, I mean, far be it from me to suggest you look at exports, because in 2016 we were the 5th biggest exporting country in the world. We're now the 4th. So, I mean, that surely, I mean, I'm not putting that down entirely to Brexit, but it's not all bad news. That's all I'm saying.
That's not a complete statistic, because we don't know what's happened to the export figures of the other countries. It's not good enough to say we've gone up.
Well, they haven't overtaken us. That's to be sure.
Yeah, but surely it's more about our trade in general and the health of our economy in general, rather than pluck one statistic out of the year. People, if you ask people in this country if they feel better off now than they did in 2015 or 2016, I don't think you'll find many of them who'll say that they do.
I think that is probably fair, but you can't lay that at the door of Brexit completely. I mean, obviously COVID is, and I find it really difficult in many areas to try and work out what was caused by COVID and what was caused by Brexit, because I'm quite happy to accept there have been negative impacts in some areas.
I accept that. I mean, COVID did influence a lot of things, but at the same time, we can't keep saying, well, it wasn't Brexit, it was COVID. You have to look at it and say Brexit has played a big part where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, another ridiculous thing that I'm sure you know about is the fact that we're having produce in UK supermarkets labelled not fit for consumption in the European Union, even though it's being sold in UK supermarkets. And this is to do with the fact that Northern Ireland didn't want to be differentiated. And those sorts of things are just ridiculous to my mind. But the cost of imports, I think you also need to look at the issue of food security. And I think that we're much more aware now that the fact that we need to produce more of our own food. Yes, we are doing great trade deals around the world, and yes, there are more exports. But ultimately, I think we need to be more self-sufficient within the UK in our food production.
Parmjit?
I think this is where the common man and woman out there just pull their hair out because they just expect their politicians to sort this stuff out.
Yes.
Easy for me to say, you guys are the politicians, I'm not now. But I mean, at a practical level, come on, there must be a way to find a way through this. And the fact that it isn't happening just adds something to that whole kind of feel of this is the end of something at the moment. No disrespect to your party and where you're at, but there's a lot of failings out there, and also it does happen when you start to run out of steam, and people are distracted, and civil servants switch off, and it's really sad to see. But these are things you would expect governments to be able to find solutions for. And if it, regardless of what Iain might say, it's all going to be okay, exports are better, but if it's costing people twice as much,
I didn't quite say that, to be fair to myself.
I'm not putting words in your mouth. You did something similar, but you didn't mean it in that sense. But that's fine.
Right, 45 seconds for everyone on this one from Julie. Should we criminalise lying politicians? Now, the Welsh Parliament, an amendment was tabled calling for it to be made illegal for a Senedd member or candidate to willfully mislead Parliament or the public. It was backed by the Liberal Democrats and the Tories. Well, that's interesting, isn't it, Christy?
I wouldn't have a problem, because I don't think we should lie to Parliament. I don't think we should lie to anybody.
How do you define a lie?
Like that says deliberately misleading. If you deliberately mislead Parliament and people, I think that's... Criminalising it, I don't know, is that going too far? We definitely need to restore faith in politicians. The public have no faith in politicians at the moment, and we have to find measures, and I think that's what this is trying to do, is trying to restore people's faith and say, look, they are telling the truth, because if they're not, they're going to be in trouble.
Well, the three of you certainly know that there are times in politics when you might not deliberately lie, but you can't tell the whole truth, particularly if you are a government minister in charge of security or something like that. And, I mean, where do you draw the line?
You're not supposed to mislead. Even you're a government minister in charge of security. The ministerial code says you don't mislead.
You can lie by omission, can't you?
The ministerial code is not strong enough, I don't think. We've seen over the last 2 or 3 years where it's been abused.
Right, I said 45 seconds.
Yes, you did.
You've already had 90.
Minutes.
Ben?
It's not going to work. It would never work if you actually tried to do it. I mean, pinning down the definition of a lie and bringing the police into trying to do this with politicians. I mean, there is an example of this row playing out recently. Boris Johnson, Partygate. The House of Commons does have I think it's a ministerial code, that says you cannot mislead the House. He was accused of doing that by his critics, by suggesting no rules were broken when they were. There was an investigation by a group of MPs. They decided that he had deliberately misled the House. He was going to face a vote in the House about whether all MPs agreed with that, and he decided to quit beforehand. So there is a process for holding people to account if they're believed to have done that. You can have a debate about whether you think Boris lied or not, but MPs seem to determine that he would in the end of his political career.
Parmjit?
Yeah, misleading the House was always one of those really embarrassing things. You didn't want to be on the record doing that, and people would invariably call you out with urgent questions and the likes if you did. So legislating, it just sounds like legislating for the sake of it, and everybody can argue about what should be done.
You could argue that you could bring that into any form of working life. I mean, so business people should be subject to it as well. Joe?
Yeah, but politicians sign up to the Nolan Principles of public life, and I personally think that integrity is an essential part of our role, and therefore, it's down to us to have that moral and ethical code.
Tina has our fun question, which I'll let you into a little secret. I normally warn our panel in the 45 break what that's going to be, but I forgot to do so this time. So this comes as a complete surprise to them. Tina says, Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho has revealed she once painted herself orange and dressed up as an Oompa Loompa for a literary-themed supper club. What's your most memorable fancy dress outfit? While you're thinking of it, I'll give you mine. When I was 18 at secondary school, we had a fancy dress disco, and I went as a gamekeeper. Not only did I take my father's 12-bore shotgun, I took a cartridge belt as well, so I had the ammunition too. Can you imagine that happening nowadays? So that's my contribution. Parmjit?
I was actually an MP at the time, and on my stag do, my friends got me, and I had no choice but to wear it, this John Travolta outfit from Saturday Night Fever, the white suit, down to the navel and all the rest of it. And I won't lie, I felt great.
And the pictures still exist somewhere on the internet. Joe?
So as a teenager, I dressed up as Black Magic, the chocolates, but also, all dressed in black with sort of spiders and things. So it was a bit cryptic.
Definitely is. Christine?
I once dressed up as Jimmy Cranky because I'm from Clydebank.
I thought you would say Jimmy Savile there for a moment.
No, I dressed up as Jimmy Cranky for a fancy dress party when I worked in the Highlands.
And how did that go down?
Well, I'd forgotten to tell...
Did they think you'd come as Nicola Sturgeon?
It was before Nicola was that well known. It was before she was First Minister, but I'd forgotten to tell my husband it was a fancy dress party. And he turned up just wearing his jeans and a T-shirt and wasn't terribly amused.
Ben?
Abraham Lincoln. It was a figures from history, and I had a big black top hat and a terrible beard. And my girlfriend went as the Black Death, so she was just a diseased cell.
Did you break up soon after?
No, we're still together, actually.
Goodness
me. Lincoln and the Black Death.
Does sound very Telegraph, though, doesn't it?
It was great. I won't go into what happened.
Really enjoyed the last hour. Thank you all very much indeed to Joe Gideon, Ben Riley-Smith, Parmjit Dhanda and Christine Jardine. Coming up in the next hour, I demoted him now I talk up to the programme, King Charles, not Prince Charles. He has been out and about speaking to cancer patients today on his first public engagement since being diagnosed. And he's got a lot of praise for re-entering the public realm so quickly. But I wonder whether you've been in that situation where you suffered from maybe a long-term illness and you've gone back to work and you've gone back a little bit too soon. Now, given what happened to me last night, I wondered whether I've gone back too soon tonight, but I'm not comparing that with what Prince Charles has gone through at all. But what... Sorry, did I say Prince again? You see, I think maybe I should leave the next hour to Ben Kentish, don't you, again? But possibly not. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, a former